never asked if you could hear me, but I hope you can.
Yes, we can.
I'm not using my mother of 6 voice, just so you know. I also have 13 grandchildren at this moment in time.
Love it.
So I'm learning from them the peace and God's love more than I ever did before. And before I start, I just want to say thank you again to Angela. I think her parents must have known she would be an angel to others. I really thank you. So this morning, I would like to talk with you. Please raise your hand in the back if you don't hear me, because I tend to get lost in my talk, not in whether people are noticing or not. But I wanted to share with you something that's very precious to me. As Angela told you, I have been here before. I think it's maybe 3 years ago when my book was being moved around the country. And I really enjoyed so much this community. As I have in Texas, there's a Unity Church in Austin that I go to, and there's also one in California, in Monterey, that's been very precious to me. So from the time that I first went to Unity, 35 years ago, I guess it was, I have this special place in my heart for all of Unity. And even though I'm Catholic, I find that you're much more uplifting than my church is sometimes. So I thank you so much for allowing me to come and share this with you today. What I want to talk to you about is a journey that I have been on, moving from grief to gratitude, finding extraordinary gifts along the way. How many of you have lost someone very precious to you? Okay. Good amount of people. I find everywhere I go, everyone has found someone that they really miss or didn't get a chance to say goodbye like I did, or didn't have a chance to finish their business, and it's a tsunami right now in the world. So my work over the last 11 years have been to help people find a way to get that business of death finished perfectly. But in the meantime, this is my story. I have been talking about grief for 11 years now, since the book has come to be. But I also have some things that have happened to me that I think may have happened to you or someone you know. As for me, my story begins when my mother died in 2004. And I know how she feels, whoever that is. Somebody needs mama. And I think that is so typical. Isn't that how we all feel when we lose somebody? I want someone to comfort me and to take care of me and to help me understand what's going on, what happened there, which is usually, just like this, a wonderful thing, just that we don't understand. And so for my purposes, when my mother died in 2004 and Cindy died, my daughter, in 2005, I've been on a journey that has taken me from complete devastation and loss to an extraordinary gift of gratitude for the things I learned along the path. Now for me, it's been 15 years since my mother died. And it has brought me an enormous amount of interesting stories that I want to share with you today. One of which is, as my mother lay dying, this is 2004, I was called by hospice. I sat next to her bed for, I think 5 hours. Nothing happened except that she was garbling words and I couldn't understand what she was saying. I couldn't understand the words themselves, but I did understand the intensity of her conversation, supposedly with someone up there. I didn't know what that was. And even though I was hospice trained, anybody hospice trained here? I was totally hospice trained, and my brain went someplace else when my mother was dying. So I didn't put it all together at the time. But what happened is that she, in her last 15 minutes of her life, she gave me this introduction to life after death that I never, in my years at that point in time, ever knew about personally. I had read about it, but I never knew about it. So I sat with my mother for these 5 hours, and then at the very end of her life on earth, she got up from her prone position to a 45-degree angle, looked up at the ceiling with a joy that I have not seen since my first daughter was born, and all the wrinkles in her face disappeared as she went, oh, oh, oh. And then she lay down and died, just like that.
Wow, that's awesome.
I didn't realize that I was getting the first of a dozen gifts that are going to follow that particular moment in time. So I continued to think about her and what was going on there and how did that happen. And nobody I knew that I could talk to was able to help me understand. So watching my mother at that particular time got me thinking. I was still taking care of family. I had a son who was getting married. I had a son who was getting divorced. I had a daughter who had a baby who turned out to be autistic. I had another daughter who had a 2-year-old who was diagnosed with cancer. I was living the days of our lives at that point in time. So I didn't have the grief that I could have had if nothing else had been going on. But as a mother of 6, I'll tell you that never happened to me in all these years. So basically, I kept thinking about this, and then I kept thinking, gosh, I would really like to know what happened at the end. And I'm sure you all have read books that have talked about people who reached through the veil and talked to their dead mother or maybe Christ himself. But all those books that I had read were written by people who were mystics or psychics or saints. And I wasn't any of those things. So my theory was that if I could talk to my mother directly, perhaps she could explain to me what happened. And more importantly to me, what happened to us along the way. We had a very challenging relationship. She was the original Jersey City Irish mother. Anybody got one of those? Okay. Anyway, I kept thinking about it, and finally, and the following year, almost a year to the day after she died, I put pen to paper after I said the prayer of protection that you all know so well, and did a meditation that kind of cleared out my ideas of what could happen. And I wrote a letter to my mother, and the letter that I wrote out was really help me understand. This was unfinished business. I needed to be able to let go of my judgment or whatever I had about our relationship, and my curiosity about what happened at the time of her death. So I wrote to her, and at the very end of my last many questions, I'm a Leo, by the way, so I had a lot of questions, the phone rang. And it sort of broke my reverie. I went to answer the phone and wondered what would happen. Could anything happen? My mother was very, very traditional Catholic. So I still had that thought in my mind. Anyway, the next day, I decided, you know what? I'm going to try again. So I took the phone off the hook, making sure that the universe understood this was very serious business. I needed this information in order to let go of what I was holding on to about our relationship. She died at 87, so we had a long history of difficulty together. So I went and I took the phone off the hook, I sat down, I did my prayer of protection, I did my meditation, and then I went to write, Dear Mom. But guess what? I wrote, Dear Loanne. More emphatically to me it was written by my hand, exactly the way my mother wrote my name. My whole life long, she wrote L-O-A-N-N-E, and I love the Palmer method that the nuns taught me, so I wrote L-O-A-N-N-E. But more importantly, I felt her presence, and it was really an amazing experience for me. So when I wrote this, I thought to myself, good grief, what's happening here, but let's keep writing anyway. So instead of stopping, I kept writing, and this is what she wrote. Dear Loanne, I am grateful for this venue. We do need to communicate, and I have tried without success to get through to you in other ways. She's clearly still my mother, got that, right? Your judgment and anger are powerful barriers to what you say you want to do. Forgiveness is the only way to open the door to communicating. I ask your forgiveness for my mistakes in communicating with you over the years. End quote. There was more. The letter goes on to encourage me to continue journaling, More letters followed, in which I did continue. I had a lot of questions. And then I realized that she was answering my questions. Not always as I asked them, but definitely with the information I needed. So this was an amazing gift to me. I received information from my mother, which really got me, about the importance of forgiveness in healing grief. Did I mention I'm a Leo? Not easy for me to forgive. I can cut your head off in 20 seconds. But part of what she was giving me was this very important gift. After giving me the gift of watching her pass through the veil, now the answer coming from her, always, always in all the letters that I wrote with her, always tagging on, forgiveness is the key. Now that wasn't easy for me at that point in time because I didn't even know how to start. But what I did find was that as I remembered the forgiveness aspect of it, and she taught me to forgive pieces, conversations, situations, things that were not the whole 9 yards of, I'm so sorry we had this difficult relationship, but this is how you do it. It was really a marvelous experience for me because I didn't know what else was coming, right? Then I had some other issues on my plate, as I mentioned to you. And so what happened is that I didn't know anything about forgiveness from my personal life. I knew to go to confession, Catholic person that I am, but I didn't know how to say or find a way to let go, which has become my other word for forgiveness. Just let go and watch it disappear. And in that place, allow your body to relax. So for me, it was really, really important. So my questions to my mother were, who are you talking to? How does that work? What happened to us along the way? My questions filled up the page, and all those things that I wanted to know, my mother answered, doing the same prayer of protection and writing in the journal. So for me, that was really a marvelous gift as well. The fourth gift from my grief, which I want to share with you this morning, is a thing called transpersonal journaling. Now, I don't know if you knew anything about transpersonal psychology, but I knew nothing about it at all. Never even came up as a subject matter. But transpersonal journaling is what I began to refer to instead of automatic writing. Did I mention I'm Catholic? It's really hard for me to say automatic writing at that time. But the transpersonal psychology world was introduced to me by a professor from Drew University around the time that I was trying to figure out what was happening to me, because I certainly wasn't going to tell Father Murphy. Right? So part of my confusion was still about what is this anyway, and how is it working? But did I stop? Not for a second. Did I tell anyone? I think it was probably 6 months later when I told my husband what I was doing, because I was getting so much information from my mother to allow me to let go or forgive. So part of my journey was that I learned transpersonal psychology had another name for my celestial conversations, which was transpersonal journaling. Has anybody ever heard of it before, transpersonal psychology? Interesting, because this past year I was asked to address the Association of Transpersonal Psychology's conference because of what I have learned, and I have learned since that time that there is so much more to know about transpersonal psychology. But at that point in time, just knowing that I was doing something, which means, for those of you who don't know, transpersonal is above the body, it's beyond the body. Transpersonal. So in the old days, which, if you believe in reincarnation, probably affected me, the people who did mystics, or people who were burned at the stake, people who were into what they call white witch, that sort of thing would be considered transpersonal. And so what would happen to people at that time would be that they would be given medication, perhaps, put away, something like that. But this particular professor, whose specialty was transpersonal psychology, told me that this is becoming, and is becoming, a very large international approach to looking at people's whole life, body, mind, and spirit. So, anyway, in the process of doing all of these things with my mother, I found that it helped me. I didn't know at the time that she was preparing me for the most difficult of situations, which I know Gwen knows as well as I do, the loss of my daughter. So part of my experience was that she was preparing me to have a way to reach through the veil to get the information I needed, either from Cindy or from someone, from herself. And that helped me a great deal, because I was in England when Cindy died. I was at a writers' conference, and I had been doing a lot of writing at that point in time, and I called home from Glastonbury. Anybody been to Glastonbury? Wonderful place. But in this case, scary as all get out, because there I was calling home to tell everyone about the wonders of Glastonbury, and I found out that our daughter had been found dead that morning, and I needed to come home. So I didn't have the time in Glastonbury to look at all the things I wanted to, except for the Chalice Well, that you probably know. And I found myself wondering what happened. And what happened, I couldn't get any answers for, because my daughter was married to someone who would not give me the information. And because she was still married, even though she was 2 weeks away from a divorce, what happened is that the powers that be would not give us the information, because we were, quote, only the parents. So we had to work through her husband, which he was not very cooperative at the time. And I found myself going back to my mother. Help me understand what happened here. What happened to her? And I asked the same questions that every mother, parent asks, having spent 7 years in Compassionate Friends and 2 years in grief counseling. We all want to know, are they okay? What happened? Was she alone when she died? What are the things that happened to her that I wasn't there to say goodbye? Which is another reason why I continued doing the journaling. My mother explained to me at that point in time what the situation was, to my satisfaction anyway, at that point in time. But then, we had another situation come up, which I believe is a gift, and that was a gift on the very day of Cindy's funeral. I was writing with my mother, trying to get a handle on how one buries their child, which, as Rose Kennedy says, is terribly abnormal. It's just not the way we're supposed to be, according to me. And I was writing to my mom, and my mother, when she gave me information, it was like a waltz, if you know what I mean, very slow. I was easy to write. And as I was in the middle of this letter, Cindy jumped in and said, I quote, "Mom, I've got to talk to you. I'm so sorry to cause you and Daddy so much pain." And she went on to explain that it had been an accident, that she was trying to get some sleep, and that she didn't realize the new prescription she had that day would be so powerful. And so part of her reaction to me was to help me understand from her, not from my mother, from her. And so I learned at that point another gift. Our loved ones can interject themselves into our lives. Voices, words, things that you pick up that you know what the meaning is. Anybody have that ever happen to them? Okay. Did I know that? I had no clue. I had never had an experience like this before. But she gave me word for word not only the answers to what she wanted to tell me about her death, but more importantly, how to help her 2 boys. She had one boy at 10 who was autistic, another one who was 12 who was devastated. All of us were devastated, but these 2 youngins were really having a hard time. So our continued experience together was, I would ask her, she would tell me, I would write it down. I now have 6 books, 6 journals completely with Cindy's information. So these 6 gifts that I had received, the idea of watching my mother pass, the idea that we can reach through the veil, that they can help us as they continue, even though they have passed, totally foreign to me. And yet everything I needed to know was there. Every question was answered. Everything I needed to continue my life, which I'm sure those of you who have lost a child, there is a doubt in your mind, is there not, that you can make it through the next day, let alone the next year. And so they, the two of them, helped me back and forth, telling me what to do and how to do. But in the center of all of this was, remember, forgiveness is the key. You must forgive. And so part of my journey was learning that I needed to learn about the power of forgiveness in healing grief. I know we all hear about it, but they're telling me it's key, it's essential to whatever we are doing. So I'm paying attention now, and I'm writing things down, and I'm thinking to myself, this is really amazing. But do I tell anyone? The only person I told was my grief counselor, who fortunately for me is a very spiritual person. And she said to me, you should write this down. There are clients of mine that I know would benefit from this tool that you have found. And I said, oh, not on your life, never. Who would read this? You know, I have never written a book. She said, well, think about it, because if you do write it, I want the copies because I have some clients that would benefit from this. Fast forward, I found myself wanting to write the book, but not knowing how. And a woman came along to me who was who turned out to be the editor and publisher of the book later on. She had a first pregnancy at 40, perfect pregnancy, delivered her dead child in Morristown Memorial Hospital. And she had no books to read, nobody to talk to. And so she said to me, if you write the book, I will edit it, because she was an editor, and you will help other people besides yourself. That caught my attention. What if what I had to say, the gifts that I had been given along the way, what if that could help another person, another mother who lost a child, another person who had unfinished business, a mother of someone who was in Afghanistan and they never got to say goodbye. This could be worth a try. So I did. And I started workshops at the time. The workshops were for me to find out if anybody else could do it, because I hadn't told anybody at this point. But part of my learning curve was that they not only could do it, they taught me how else it can be done. So that was another gift from my grief. And part of my journey, right at this point in time, was that the book was published. The book was very successful. It's all over. It's in Europe. It's in different places that I never thought any of my work would go to. But more importantly, I learned about the tsunami of grief in this world. There's a tremendous tsunami of grief going on right now. And part of our journey is to help someone through that path. Maybe not all the way. Walk a mile with them. Help them understand that they're not alone. So the ninth gift that came to me, found its way, was because of the book, being introduced to two amazing women. One of them was born in Israel. One of them was born in India. Both of them had written books about grief. And when we came together, we realized that we had an amazing synchronicity of understanding of grief that we never thought we would, even though we have nothing else in common. Geography, culture, religion, nothing. But we decided to start the International Grief Council in 2015. And so at that point in time, that was another gift. Who would have thought? This is the book that I thought no one was going to read. And yet here are these people offering to work with me. And we did our first workshop in Georgian Court 9 months to the day that we put our website up. To me, that was another gift. Meeting these women and working with them has been an absolute joy. And during my last summer, I went back to Glastonbury. And in my journey back to Glastonbury, it was because of the Grief Council. We were putting on a retreat in a Quaker retreat house, 1 hour, as it turned out, from Glastonbury. You think that's a godly? Once I realized that, I said, I gotta go back. I want some closure. I want to find out how it was in Glastonbury. What did I miss? What was I supposed to learn? And most of all, closure after 15 years. But what I discovered was I stood there and I realized that I had been being given gifts for 15 years from the good Lord of things that I never would have learned in any other manner. I never knew about life after death in the way I do now. I never knew that they could reach to us. I never knew that we could work together as souls from one side to the other. It never crossed my mind. But not only did I know it, I lived it. And more importantly, as I worked through the workshops, I found myself understanding that there are just not enough workers in the field. There are not enough people who are out there helping people go through their grief. So part of my journey and part of my gifts was learning about that and doing it, which was amazing because when this all started, my husband and I were supposed to be retiring, and instead we wound up responding to radio shows and workshops and talks and things like that. Would I trade it? If I could have Cindy back? Yeah, I would. But as a soul, not on your life. This has been the most extraordinary journey that I could possibly imagine. I feel like my soul has grown because of my grief. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but if you haven't looked at it that way, consider it. Because God works in very mysterious ways. And sometimes it takes 15 years to get through to a Leo, basically. But this whole journey, as far as I could see, has been learning to look for the gifts that come from grief. So from my experience now, looking back, and standing in Glastonbury, I got this revelation that I need to take a stock of what I've gotten. But for those of you who haven't yet had the opportunity to look back at what you've learned from your grief, I urge you, pay attention. Don't wait 15 years to say, oh my gosh, I never learned compassion in this way. I never learned other things that I needed to know. I never got that. You are getting it. It just takes some of us, like me, a little bit more time to absorb the gifts that are being given. So during my last visit, I thought about these gifts, and I decided last summer that I would write about it. And when I got home, I called Angela and I said, I got the idea for a book here. Most of the books that I read in these 15 years have been to get you to a new normal, which is wonderful because we need that after someone dies. But they don't encourage you to look back at what you're getting from a gift point of view. And that's what I am looking at now. There were 12 gifts that I added up here, but I have gotten more. Let me give you a few. Compassion, but now definitely I am more compassionate. I am more humble. I am more accepting that grief is a teachable journey. My courage definitely improved because it took courage for me to look beyond the world that I know. My wisdom, without a doubt, has grown 100%. I can't tell you how many people have said, oh my goodness, I thank you for your wise counsel. It isn't me. It's what came through me because of my grief. My faith in God, oh my gosh, it has grown so much. God has been good to me over my lifetime, but now I feel I walk with Him. I even went to the Holy Land to walk the Dolorosa, to be sure that I got all the information I needed, and did I learn a lot there. What I'm telling you is that if you can find a way to move from grief to gratitude, I encourage you to do that. There is a bright star at the end of this, the star that your soul is being expanded and helped to grow through the suffering that you're going through right now. It may not seem so, but I'm here to tell you that it is so because I've given these talks and these workshops over the last 15 years in many, many countries, not countries, states, and I've found that people are echoing that. So if you have any interest in what I'm sharing with you, I would really love to talk with you about it because I'm in the process of writing this book and I don't want to miss a chance to add other gifts in the book so that people can find their way, not just to a new normal, but through a new normal. And for you, I hope that I can count on you to come through. And even if you can't do it, if you leave your name in the back, I will call you because this is a very precious time for me. In fact, I call it a holy moment. It is a holy moment for me. It's like an aha. And I think for those of you who are not quite there yet, perhaps you would like to remember it, because the gifts keep coming. They keep coming. And if you would allow me, I would really like to chat with you later on about that. But before I go, and I know that I'm running over time, I really would love to share this meditation that I've been given permission from Daily Word to give. If you just kind of quietly, just be still for a moment. See if this doesn't speak to you about what I'm talking to you about. Today, I embrace all things with an attitude of gratitude. My life might be a mix of what I call good or bad, but I choose to believe it is all happening for me, with each experience benefiting me in some way, even if I'm not able to see my good or my growth at this moment. I trust that all will be revealed in time. No matter what I'm facing, with every breath I can inhale possibility, giving thanks for a chance to grow. I can exhale, releasing any resistance to circumstances or people. I am faith-filled, knowing that with an attitude of gratitude, everything leads me to the highest outcomes. Whatever I'm brought to, I will be brought through. And so it is. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.